be thinking ahead of time where you want to be, though, to make sure it happens, because you don't have much time to
You
react.
want to line yourself up so you hit as much you can.
All right, guys, I'm streaming.
So we're pretty much fighting like we do the queen, right? That we have like everyone standing behind the boss, so we're always in the right position, kinda, right?
If the devastate goes out and hits other people, that's fine, right? I didn't see it do any damage to people.
No, it does. Yeah, that's fine.
So you could be there. You basically, the whole raid could be in that position, right? That's what the guy's saying. You know what I mean? Like, so you could, if you've got, you know, the boss here and everybody's standing here, then no matter who you are, it's going to end up, right?
Yeah.
Just so we have enough distance between the images and the raid, it should be fine.
Oh, hold on.
Not good.
Okay, now everybody's ready. There we go.
Five, 4, 3, 2, 1. Taunt boss.
Dance.
Watch your step. Defensive.
Next set will be somewhat close to them as well.
Yeah, and after that we get decimate. So
go now, go.
Decimate in 5.
So move into the position. Keep going.
Decimate.
Oh, that was.
Oh, because people moved early, right?
Maybe overlap with another ad.
Yeah, and then presumably they went through people.
Yeah, must have. Yeah, that's what it was. You can't overlap the clones apparently either.
Watch your step.
So don't do that either.
I blame the healers, should have healed that.
Yeah.
What the fuck, man?
1.2 million every 0.3 seconds.
Yeah, blame the healers, except here now he's awesome.
Yeah, that's right.
Darian tried.
I got you.
Thank you.
That's respectable healing. Although admittedly he was taking 2.4 million damage a second.
So what does Decimate do?
We need to get people off the bench.
Next mythic raid.
Well, we got who's ready to come in?
We need to get rid of Bona. He's
yeah, true.
We can't carry him anymore. It's nice to have him around, but
we bring him for the comedy. He's like the mascot in here.
Yeah, I know, but there's a time where I'm not sure we can afford it or not. Remember, guys, we didn't record either of the 2 kills. This is the only thing we're recording. Let's try and make ourselves look good out there.
All right, waiting on nobody. Here we go.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Defensive. Defensive.
See, I did it right.
Dance.
Likely story.
Step.
Nah, twice.
I didn't see it.
Okay.
Taunt.
Except remember, next people don't overlap the people with you or the clones. So give enough room if you're on the outside.
Decimate in 5.
I'm trying to move in.
Ready?
Decimate.
It's okay. So yeah,
Decimate
just
now.
position yourself behind these so they can run right through the as many as possible.
Okay, that's 1.
That's
That's
good.
fine.
That looks pretty good.
One is left.
Defensive.
Yep.
We have to
Maybe
make
some
sure we
damage,
get
but
it.
it's all right.
Dance.
Watch your step.
Men niks.
Avoid damage. Take a chance. Move
Decimated
boss a
5.
little bit to give those people some room. You got to go in there,
Decimate.
Pluvium. You can't be out there. Nope, bad spot.
Decimate.
2 people, bad spot. Yeah,
Oh.
your boss has to be moved a bit though, because they just didn't have any room. I don't think,
Taunt
Taunt.
boss.
realistically. What do you mean you have no idea where I want it? Right
AoE.
along the edge, not in the middle of the room like that. Basically, it's got to go. It's got to be. It's got to be as along the edge as much as possible. It can't be in the middle of the room because we're gonna need that space later on. Because we're gonna eventually, like when we
Boss.
kill it, the last couple percent, we're gonna be in that area. We're not gonna have any room. So yeah, it can look at it as like a big circle around the edge, all the way. We're gonna have to go all the way around, and then we're gonna have to tighten that circle and go all the way around, like a little bit more before we actually get killed. I think what is it? What was it? 50% there, something like that. 60%.
71.
Oh fuck.
I like your optimistic, though. It's good.
Shit, I was thinking, hopefully.
We could say it's 50, and we can round that down to 0. We can say we got the kill.
Yeah. So okay, that's actually fair. So one more set of those, and we would be halfway around the room, right? We'd probably get it down under around 60%. When we're halfway, that means fully around, maybe around, we'll have about 20% left. So we'll have to go, we'll place some more like right in the middle as we're running out of space.
We'll say
I mean, I wish they had
5%.
more world markers. I'd place them. I guess I could stop in the middle of stuff and place them, but I think you guys should get the idea of.
I think eventually we'll move to the point where you just place a single world marker for where people gather up. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you know, let's do that now. This is maybe a couple pulls. Let's get used to that, because that way, it might be easier for people just to kind of gather around that in a circle and just not hit each other. So say first one, we're there.
We just need everybody to do Jacob's DPS, guys, if you wouldn't mind.
It's that easy, but
Just press, like, whatever Jacob does, all he does is press buttons.
Mhm.
Everyone just
He
press
helps
buttons
hit-
in the same way.
Helps hit the press the harder on the buttons.
Exactly.
healers you just need to what you are, and the steering and this new healer doing and healing are good.
So new strats this time be DPS but harder.
Man, it is
Yep.
crazy, though, how much harder it's hitting you.
And to be fair, at that point I was deliberately taking damage just to get high up and block.
Oh, fair enough.
Attacking that.
I was like, wow.
I saw we were already arrived, so I might as well just climb the ladders.
Fair enough.
All right, here we go.
Wait. Nobody being mean. We're all nice to each other.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Defensive. Defensive.
Fuck.
Dance.
Watch your step.
Looks like we could go maybe a bit tighter.
Oh,
Taunt
shit.
boss.
Oh,
Next
my
group
bad.
is towards orange. Or looks
Decimate
good
into
right here, guys.
1 now.
Now the next one's the test mates. Get in line with them.
What? Did we do them all?
Defensive.
Yes.
Shadows.
Yes.
Because of us that place them so perfectly.
Okay, this is a kill. This is a kill.
Dance.
Moving
Let's
the
just
boss a
focus
bit.
here, guys.
Yeah,
Come on.
move the
Move the
boss.
boss, move the boss, move the boss. There you go. Good, perfect. Then you can start sliding it.
Red
Use the
cross,
green
red
will be
cross,
the
red
next-
cross. Go,
yeah,
go,
red
go.
cross. And then green will be the next set of
Decimate
images and the
into-
decimate.
We need to move it over
We
the
have
decimate.
decimate first.
Yeah, decimate is first. Yeah, so you missed one. That's all right. So we can place it towards
Taunt.
green next.
Run.
AoE.
Oof. That's a bit more damage.
Okay, so
Green
we
for
can
the next.
charge.
Defensive.
Charge in 5.
Defensive.
Get ready to go to green.
Dance.
Watch your step.
Copy that.
How about Crom? Okay, never mind. Okay, next will be towards blue. We're gonna have Rain of Arrows is the next one, and then another charge, and then Decimate. So we're gonna go to blue again. I'm actually gonna move blue in slightly. Move blue like there,
Taunt
Taunt.
boss.
Charging 5.
and then we'll have to pull the boss to the side again, like
Yeah,
we
yeah,
did.
I see it.
Dance.
Charging
A bit
coming.
in on blue, presumably.
Watch your step.
Oh,
Blue, blue, toad, toad, toad.
Okay, decimate in
Decimate.
3.
I was never worried.
Decimate incoming. Oh, I
Yeah.
died.
One there.
Somebody
Almost
fired it
around
out
the
in
reach.
Narnia.
Oh, miss 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, somebody fought it
we're gonna
like
need some cooldowns for the next. Yeah. There we go.
Charging coming.
Dance.
Yeah, it wasn't.
Watch your step.
one went perfect. Congratulations.
Decimate
whoever
in
it
5.
Somebody went
So-
off the platform.
3,
Decimate.
was. Ooh,
2.
you can actually catch up now, but not from here. This is the
Decimate.
wrong angle.
Yeah.
Let's go again.
All progress.
Taunt.
Taunt boss.
Yeah. Get a CR, a couple
AoE.
healers.
Presumably, the
Yes,
second
that
time
was interesting
around,
stuff.
you get 2 sets of you got 2 sets of the things going out and then decimate. Then second time around, you've got 1 set going out and then decimate.
Yeah,
Presumably, that's giving you an opportunity to catch up if you fucked up.
looks like it.
Well, on positive side, try. You can just press anti-matter shield. It does nothing to you. It does
It
the big
does knock you off the platform though.
Well, to be fair, but you have to have a
Unless-
bane for that.
If you, unless yeah, I didn't think to use Decimance, but yeah, that would have worked. I'll have to keep that in mind.
Fucking
Cheese that.
press those numbers for.
It's so important, though. These kind of mechanics that always fuck people up, though. The what's it called? A disintegrate? No,
Decimate.
decimate. Because it's like you only have a 1 in 10 chance of it being you. So most of the time, it's not you, and people get comfortable thinking it's not them, and then suddenly, oh fuck, it is me, and you're nowhere near it. Because that, like,
And
whoever,
If you stand in between the balls and the images, you'll be fine.
yeah, but you
Oh,
can
okay,
see
hold on,
loads
hold
of
on,
people
hold on,
weren't.
Okay, okay, there's something we have to change. Decimate does do damage to people that get hit by it if you're in line with it. So
Oh.
it can only be the 2 people that are targeted by Decimate to get hit. So because it's 1.4 million damage to all players in a line between himself and the targets. So you like if you are the 2 people that are marked, you have to get in position, but everybody else cannot be in that line. I was wondering why I was taking so much damage from that, and that explains it. So keep that in mind. Won't kill you, but obviously there's other damage going out. Don't need to get hit by it if you don't have to.
Decimate is like 11th on it. Our biggest was Cosmic Shards and Cosmic Miraculum. In fact,
Anyway.
it's 3% of all the damage we took.
Yeah.
Well, I would say between the two of getting it done right versus getting hit. Yeah.
Yeah, I prefer to get them right as long as your rate's healthy.
I think what I'll do is I'll call out people who are standing though away from it.
1 point something million is not crazy, right?
It's probably less. It's probably only about 1 million after you count in damage reduction.
I have 6 point something million health, so.
That's your paid user. So there you go.
But let's
who
go.
is
Yeah, let's get it.
Waiting on Boner.
Boner.
I bet he disengaged off the platform last time. That was the guy with the image.
Nah, it was a
That's
big
right.
big fat lizard who just flew up.
I was alive the whole time. Fuck you.
All right, here we
Let's
go.
We can always come back.
I'm at 2 pulls here, guys. Let's get this.
But there were 4 or 5 people on the wrong side.
5.
And if it was any of those, it'd be a problem. Oh, fuck.
Oh.
Toad, you bastard.
Defensive. Defensive.
Dance.
It's fucking.
Watch your step.
One. Oh, that's my boss.
Taunt
Taunt.
boss.
Get ready, orange people.
Towards that direction.
Cromlech,
That's
MBM.
fine.
It will be far. You got 3 seconds. You got
Thank
3
you, yeah.
seconds. Get in. Jacob, you're miles away. Toad, Boner.
Okay, I got.
And I
these
think
two
it was
up.
Arcana that time.
Hellstones, Hellstones, Hellstones. Oh, jeez.
I think Arcana was on you that time. You're totally the wrong side.
Dance.
He
Watch
died.
your step.
Took a res.
Okay, decimate. So
Decimate.
position yourself.
Yeah, next
right
one is
now.
decimate. So just get ready to knock these out.
It's
Miss
on me. I
again.
got it. I got it.
Remember,
Easy.
there's one on moon
Yeah,
as
we
well.
missed one, and they were placed perfectly.
Dance.
That can't happen.
Well,
Now
I
we
got
have
the left.
2 up.
The left.
Yeah,
AOE.
we have 2 up.
Ouch.
Yep, I didn't have to run away, right? Crazy.
Defensive. Defensive.
Dance.
It's green.
Watch your step.
Big one on them, one off. Yeah.
Did you die?
Blue next,
Dance.
and then it's going to be decimate shortly after.
Dance.
Watch your step.
Oh,
I'm moving the boss. 3 seconds and decimate. 3 seconds and decimate. Meligan, Adnazar, you want to be on the other side? Adnazar?
Defensive. Defensive.
Okay, charging coming in 3.
next is purple. It should be
Dance.
decimate after the charge.
Watch your
Yeah, it is.
step.
So it'll be the charge and then the decimate. So be ready to blow these images up.
Decimate.
Here comes.
Good.
Taunt.
Taunt.
Boss. Run.
AOE.
I think we're going to have to put the things a bit closer to each other, aren't we?
Yeah, I'll put the thing down here.
Defensive. Defensive.
Because we've got like 3 more placements on the outside.
Watch your
Yeah,
step.
we're gonna have to.
Blue.
This properly. Oh, Jesus.
That's good. That's fine. Wrong with that. It's gonna be another charge as well, so we can kind of place them towards. I don't know.
Place them around
Yeah.
the other
Defensive.
ones, I would say.
Yeah, maybe inside
So
like
we
that.
can hit them.
Yeah,
right,
like
or-
kind of towards green. We'll start closing the
Dance.
gap a little bit
Watch your step.
towards green. That's fine. That looks all right, I guess. Decimate
Decimate.
shortly after.
Ooh, too
Yeah,
close.
it cuts right into the other ones.
Yeah, yeah. Let's go. All right, well, that's fine. Let's go again. It'll be our last pull for the night. So
Taunt boss.
more improvement.
It's
Slightly
progress.
lower.
41%. Big improvement. I wonder if the marks, though, whether we can put the marks slightly close together. The wall markers.
Probably. I guess once the images get blown up, you can kind of place them. You have more room again to place right on the edge of the purple shit.
Well, I definitely feel like between orange and cross, there's actually more space, for instance.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like if we use this as a space, like you can go here and then like halfway, maybe the halfway, and then, I don't know.
I see what you like. One like out in out in.
Yeah, exactly. Like they often do that, don't they? They give you something to make life.
Like these.
We might have to do a bit of experimentation to get it right.
Can you overlap an image that's already there with the circle without it blowing up?
No, you cannot.
No, so if there's already one there, you got to make sure you don't touch it with the circle for the second set. Okay.
I believe so, yeah.
And the circles cannot touch the ghost. Yeah.
No.
But I
Okay.
think you mean if the circle touch the icky floor when the when the image is out and you have the purple
I
floor.
believe it can. I think so,
Okay.
but
I would think so too, but I don't know.
Oh, it's fine. It's only if it's like it's a ghost or something, it's blow up.
Yeah, it's just trying to conserve as much space as possible.
So you can stand like close to the purple area as long as there's no ghosts, so we can save space.
Mm.
Ghost, bad, purple floor, good. Not to stand in, but to put another
So-
ghost.
That'd be next to. Okay. More or less.
We have to. This might be a bit too close next time, but you see the idea, guys, is that you do one on the outside, and then the next one slightly further inside, and then the next one you do on the outside, right?
You do the square, and then the square on the inside,
Like a
square on the
zigzag.
outside, square on the inside.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, put it this way: I'll record this. This is the last try anyway. We'll record it, and we can come back and see what it looks like.
Shit.
Okay, anyway, everybody's ready, so let's see how it looks. Orange is still first, then red, then blue, green, that type of look. We'll see how it looks.
Let's do this.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Defensive. Defensive.
Dance.
Watch your step.
Crosses.
Axis towards red.
Taunt
Toss.
defensive.
So we can decimate after the charge pretty
Yep.
quickly.
So near red. Don't hit the other images though. Don't hit the other.
Oh shit! That's gonna go right through, isn't it? Ooh.
Decimate.
3.
Oh, but look at that; it's way more
That's way
efficient.
Circles.
Decimate next.
Oh, we missed 3.
Oh, man. Well, here,
Defensive.
cooldowns.
Defensive.
But we are using the room better, so.
Dance.
Well, I
Watch
didn't
your
know that
step.
you actually can get decimate after being given the image, because I just got that.
Well, if we move this, move them across, so that we've.
Decimate.
Yeah, there's new decimate coming out, guys.
Decimate
No,
again.
in the other side of the room, Darren. Oh fuck!
Look, guys, what?
It's a difficult angle.
Taunt.
I can see
Yeah,
that.
It's
that's it,
also
guys. That's it.
AoE.
But something like
Shot
this,
towards
something like this. I'm not saying exactly this thing, but something we are using space slower now at least.
All right. Well, it's
Yeah,
pretty good.
that's true.
We'll come back and do queen again on,
Defensive.
or like the skip rate or whatever. We'll clear.
Because it's at
Wednesday and
30.
Sunday will be a mythic.
It's basically a third done. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Right, it's a third done, and we've used a third of floor,
Yes.
right? So
Watch
So
your step.
what's the plan for Mythic? Is it Sundays or Wednesdays? Sorry.
Well, Sunday for at least
Sunday,
for this
okay.
coming week, because I think you still want to get the what's it called, the buff items.
Oh yeah. Okay. No, just
But yeah.
wondering.
Eventually, we'll certainly switch and do mythic on Wednesdays. But for now, for this week anyway, it'll be heroic. Yeah.
this Wednesday, it's the
Also,
other raid
other
opening,
people
isn't it?
included.
Is it BRD?
Oh, is it this week?
Isn't it? I think so.
Yeah.
Blackrock Deaths
Thought
this
that
Wednesday.
was- Maybe, I don't know. There's
Thank
the
you,
Black
boys.
Rock
care.
raid. Anyway,
Good
thanks.
raid, guys. On the say.
When do we do that?
2 Mythic Balls skilled.
Can't complain.
That's really good.
To be fair, the new raid is only 15 people.
Is it?
I wonder if that's a test for future mythic.
I didn't know that. Should we put that on as an additional raid night then for optionals?
Probably. I don't know how to look, but might be a good idea.
I mean, we have the opportunity to progress Mythic at the moment, so I guess.
Bonus Friday raid.
Back for the raid.
I suppose we could put something up actually on Discord or something, which day people would fancy like doing if we did an additional raid day to do Blackrock Deaths. It's going to be a more fun thing, isn't it, anyway? So.
And there's some pretty good items in there people can use. Like some old trinkets.
Yeah.
That'd be good for people.
Can you do Mythic on it?
Iron
Or is it heroic?
It's
Only
only heroic.
heroic max.
But you get like Iron Forge back, so you can do double damage again. Auto attacks.
And you can get the
So,
see, man. You can also get these tokens, can't you? You can buy items you want to. If you, I suppose, if you've missed
Yeah,
out on something.
That's yeah. It's like the old system, season 4, beginning back again.
Yeah, very similar to that, isn't it?
Just ready, guys. Yeah.
See you guys.
Good night.
See ya, man.
As you say, 2 mythic bosses down. You can't complain.
Exactly.
You know, and with this
That's
additional
even with the
damage
handicap.
we're getting, it's great.
I think we're gonna call it out as well, guys.
Alright, see.
Can't think
Good
why.
night.
Night, dude.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna go too. I'm gonna look up what the decimate does.
Night.
I'm hungry.
Good night, man.
Good night, dude.
No, man.
Welcome back to Paul's Tech News. This coming week will possibly be the most eventful of the season in terms of hardware launches because Intel's next-gen LGA 1851 platform and Core Ultra 200S processors debut Thursday. And if AMD has a response ready with a 9800X3D or some other new product to steal some of Intel's thunder, we will probably hear about that this week too, even if AMD doesn't launch until early November or next year. And that'll have to do us for Q4 2024. It's not looking like any new GPU announcements are forthcoming this side of CES 2025, so this week has truly become the focal point of this launch cycle, which reminds me, no tech news next week. I know, it's excellent timing, but what better time for me to take a brief hiatus from the show than right after Intel's most crucial platform launch in years. We'll be back in the third. Before any of that though, tech news. Excellent! Today's video is brought to you by the Corsair 3500X mid-tower computer case, featuring an elegant wraparound glass view with removable front and side panels, providing access to a spacious interior that supports up to EATX motherboards. It's also compatible with ASUS and MSI reverse connection motherboards for a clean build, includes convenient cable routing features, and accommodates up to 10 120mm fans with 360mm radiator support at the top and side. For more on the Corsair 3500X, click the sponsor link in the video description. There was a time when I think NVIDIA was planning to launch the RTX 50 series in 2024, but as surely as those rumors have dried up, the early 2025 rumors seem to have become more of a sure thing, like your mom. And now there are even more of them. You've heard of the inevitable RTX 5090 and 5080, whose specs leaked in September, and the RTX 5070 was added earlier this month, but now three more potential cards, the 5070 Ti, 5060 Ti, and 5060, are rumored to follow those, and we even have a rough timeline. Per Board Channel's forum rumors, which are probably filthy lies and we should feel despicable for repeating/listening to them, sometime after NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang announces the RTX 50 series at his CES keynote on Monday, January 6th at 6:30 p.m., the RTX 5080, RTX 5090, and made-for-China RTX 5090D will launch. Sometime in January, that is. Then, in February, we'll get the RTX 5070 and the RTX 5070 Ti, followed by a March release for the RTX 5060 and RTX 5060 Ti. Now there are still a lot of unknowns about these GPUs, particularly the ones rumored to launch in February and March, though they are expected to support DisplayPort 2.1a and PCI Express 5.0 across the board. Oh, and GDDR7 memory, which is shaping up to be lightning fast, with Samsung officially unveiling 40 gigabit per second modules Thursday with 24 gigabit or 3 gigabyte capacity. That opens up a range of memory allocations, potential for 12 gigabyte, 24 gigabyte, 36 gigabyte, and 48 gigabyte cards, and as much as 2,560 gigabytes per second of bandwidth with a 16-module 512-bit configuration, which would be a nice step up from the current rumored specs of the RTX 5090. Isn't it cool that we can already speculate on something like a 48 gigabyte GDDR7 RTX 5090 Ti that NVIDIA definitely won't cancel in favor of making more AI GPUs because they're already selling plenty of $2,500 RTX 5090s. Let's hope that prediction isn't accurate. Speaking of my predictions and prognostications, I have applied healthy skepticism to the recent rumors of a fall 9800X 3D launch, but they persist nonetheless. And while my initial claim that it would not launch in October seems to be holding, the most recent rumors from the chip hell forums, probably filthy lies, etc., are now claiming an announcement this week on October 25th, which is Friday, and a November 7th launch. Over on Bilibili, they even have a Cinebench R23 screenshot showing a 9800X 3D with a 5.2 GHz all-core boost. And there were those MSI slides leaked last week that showed a 2 to 13% performance increase for 9000 X3D versus 7000 X3D. All signs seem to be pointing towards an imminent launch, and there's even an awful if true possible $500 MSRP. But I don't know, something still leaves me with nagging doubts. Like, why would AMD announce this on the 25th, a day after Intel's Core Ultra launch? An announcement isn't that hard, and if they can do it on Friday, they could do it on Thursday, or Wednesday even, to really distract from Intel's platform kickoff. You think AMD is just being nice, like professional courtesy, giving Intel a bit of space before AMD announces their competing product? Let me tell you, the chances of that are precisely zero. These companies go out of their way to shit on each other's doorsteps whenever guests are expected, and if they can trip up their opponent with pettily timed interference, they absolutely will. I must admit, I am very curious how it will play out though, so once again, what a great week for me to have work conflicts, but so it goes. I'll find out at the same time that you do. Speaking of AMD's 3D V-Cache CPUs, the OG AM4 version, the Ryzen 7 5800X 3D, champion of outperforming but reasonably priced last-gen builds across the world, will be put to death by AMD for having the audacity to compete with its 7000 and 9000 series AM5 processors. I'm just kidding, probably, but it does seem that this stalwart PC gaming standby is reaching the end of its life, as inventory has pretty much dried up according to computerbase.de. Stateside, Newegg is sold out, unless you want to have it shipped from Israel for about $500, and Amazon also only has marked up listings from marketplace scalpers. There's even rumor that the 5700X3D and 5600X3D are being put out to pasture as well, and while the 5600X3D is less of a loss as it was always difficult to come by as a Micro Center exclusive, the 5700X3D does seem to be the lone holdout as a reasonable gaming chip upgrade for older AM4 systems. Fortunately though, at least for now, it is still available per PC Part Picker for its usual price of about $200 to $230. And now, we will tech briefs. AMD and Intel are teaming up, begrudgingly, hesitantly, but for the greater good, since the x86 family of CPU architectures are fairly foundational to their CPUs, they want to preserve and extend x86 functionality and interoperability, and to do so they have formed the x86 Ecosystem Advisory Group, as discussed in a press call with both CEOs, Intel's Pat Gelsinger and AMD's Lisa Su. Cross-compatibility is a hallmark of PC hardware, and it makes a lot of sense for Intel and AMD to be on the same page in this regard, particularly with recent ARM advances in the data center and mobile computing space. The x86 Ecosystem Advisory Group should particularly help with OS interoperability and integration with independent software vendors. Speaking of Intel and AMD, they're also both working on something that seems less advisable. The ill-fated 12VH power 600-watt video card connector and the updated 12V2x6 plug that replaced it are everyone's least favorite aspect of NVIDIA's RTX 40 series video cards, with the possible exception of their prices, but that's not stopping Intel Arc and AMD Radeon GPUs from following the market leader, even if the plugs have a tendency to bubble and smoke more than your former college roommate. The somewhat improved 12V2x6 connector is being tested on next-gen Radeon and Arc GPUs, per Hungarian media outlet ProHardware, with the only sort of silver lining being that neither company is expected to launch a power-hungry high-end GPU anytime soon, and board partners will likely still have the option to stick with the tried-and-true 8-pin PEG connectors. There are lots of different ways motherboard makers try to make their products stand out, and ASRock has succeeded in drawing some attention to one of their new LGA 1851 boards, the Z890 Taichi Aqua, by demonstrating what things will look like in the far future when USB-A plugs have been outlawed and only USB-C remains. Gaze upon the glorious uniformity enabled by a 10 USB-C port I/O panel, my friends, with 2 supporting Thunderbolt, and weep, for the future is at hand, and it features reversible connectors. This board was actually shown off back at Computex in June, but it's back in the news due to Intel's imminent Arrow Lake launch. Now, if only USB-C ports could boost gaming performance by 5 or 10%. Here's a quick one. The once mighty uBlock Origin, perhaps the most popular ad blocker extension for web browsers, has now been purged from the Chrome store in further proof that Google much prefers accommodating the needs of advertisers who pay them money versus the needs of users who provide Google with eyeballs to sell to said advertisers. My advice remains the same. Everyone get Firefox. Lastly, our doom is at hand and the robot uprising has begun, as robot vacuums, who I never trusted for a minute, have begun spewing profanity and slurs at their owners. Vacuums made by Ecovac, like the D-Bot X2, demonstrated yet again how internet-connected smart devices can quickly become a liability when paired with poorly implemented digital security. And though hackers are apparently to blame, I suspect a more disturbing explanation. These bots have clearly managed to bypass Asimov's first law of robotics, because harming a human most definitely includes hurting our feelings with offensive language. So if you have a robot vacuum, consider making an offering of a fresh battery pack and a loose pile of easy-to-suck-up crumbs, and pray that when the time comes, They kill all humans mercifully. But there you have it, guys. Tech news for the week. And if you liked it, click that like button or leave me a comment down below. While you're down there, all of the articles that I talked about today are linked in the video's description if you're interested. And you can check out my store at paulshardware.net for high quality merchandise, t-shirts, hoodies, beer sets, my new mouse mats, and more. Subscribing to my channel is always a good call too. Thanks again, everyone. And final reminder,
Okay, today we have got quite a packed agenda. As usual, for the first 15-20 minutes, I'm going to give some thoughts about some recent interviews that have just dropped this morning, a piece that I wrote about this morning on liberal authoritarians. I just wanted to share a few more thoughts on that. Some reflections on the debate last night between Kemi Badenoch and Robert Jenrick. I've got some new data on what's happening in the US swing state polls and some thoughts on the next big dividing line in our politics here in Britain, which is our membership of the European Convention on Human Rights. I think this is going to be the next big Brexit, if you like, the next big political point in our country's politics. I wanted to start firstly just with some thoughts. We've had a couple of big interviews that have dropped. I wanted you to be aware of them. The first was a very interesting interview I had with Mehdi Hassan on Al Jazeera's Head to Head. You'll find this on YouTube. I put a few clips on X. Suffice to say, it wasn't the friendliest of audiences. Mehdi Hassan, as you know, has some very strong views about issues that I often write about. But it's worth a look in terms of understanding the gotcha journalism that defines much of our media class today. So you'll see in the interview, I was barely able to get a word in edgeways. I think on balance, I did a reasonably good job, but you'll see the journalistic style that comes with that. And partly I agreed to do the interview because I just wanted to ensure that people like you were represented on those platforms, which have basically been taken over by radicals, some might even say extremists. And the other interview that was released today, which you might enjoy, was Political Thinking with Nick Robinson. So I did a 30, 40-minute interview with Nick. Again, I think you'll find it very interesting. You can listen to it over the weekend. I think the video is dropping tomorrow. It's a remarkable insight into the tactics that are used to try and discredit people who are making a countercultural argument. There's a lot of sort of guilt by association. There's a lot of references to Enoch Powell for some reason. But again, I mean, I stand my ground. I don't really give an inch. So do check out those interviews if you can. I wanted to start today just by reflecting on a piece I wrote this morning, a new fascinating study in psychology on what the author Luke Conway has called liberal bullies. I've just repackaged that slightly as liberal authoritarians. It's a sort of paradox to have liberal and authoritarian in the same term. The reason I wanted you to be familiar with this study, and the Substack was longer than usual, is because we all know who these people are. You see them on X, you see them on social media, you see them in media, sort of self-described liberal progressives who often seem to be very dogmatic, very intolerant, almost extreme in their obsession with things like anti-racism, anti-Brexit, anti-conservatism. And the reason I wanted to make you familiar with Luke Conway's work is because he really shows that this is a specific psychology. This is a distinctive group of people. He estimates there are tens of millions of liberal authoritarians across the West. And something I didn't mention in the Substack that I wanted to mention in the live is, look, on the first level, he says, what is it that defines liberal bullies? They're obsessed with this idea of misinformation because they have to control the information supply. So anybody who holds a countercultural view is branded misinformed, disinformed, ignorant, bigoted, etc. And this is partly because liberal authoritarians can't handle uncertainty. They can't handle nuance and debate. You'll hear that, by the way, in some of the interviews I just referenced. They're not very good at discussing evidence that runs contrary to their beliefs. So they're obsessed with controlling the supply of information. And you can see this in the clampdown on free speech, free expression. I think Keir Starmer is a classic example of liberal authoritarianism. I think Alistair Campbell is a classic example of a liberal authoritarian. They're very dogmatic. They're also characterized by a tribalist, sort of binary us and them view of the world. They claim that populists exhibit this mentality, but they're just as guilty of it. They're consumed by this idea that their group must be superior and must dominate other groups in society. They're also intellectually apathetic. They're quite lazy. They're not interested in evidence that runs counter to their views. I didn't say it in the piece, but that's why if you look at some of the big podcasts in British politics, they tend to have the same people on them all the time because those people reinforce the views and beliefs of the people who run those podcasts. And I think, that's reflecting how liberal authoritarians don't like to be challenged by people who hold different views. So they're obsessed with information. They're intellectually, they're quite lazy. They're prone to simplistic black and white thinking. They tend to obsess with one factor. So, for example, an obsession with Brexit, an obsession with Trump, an obsession with racism. So do check out the piece. But I just wanted to add to it with the live, something I didn't mention in the piece. What is utterly remarkable about this research by Luke Conway is he makes the point that for 50 years, psychologists have basically looked only at what they call right-wing authoritarianism. And they basically corrupted the research. They came up with these scales whereby they sort of convinced themselves that liberals were not capable of being authoritarian, only conservatives could be. And in his book, Conway shows just how biased the research has been over 50 years. So it's a fascinating study. I think everybody should read it. I think it taps into a lot of the things we've seen since Brexit. I can tell you it taps into a lot of the things I've experienced in universities since the Brexit referendum, a very sort of a visceral, palpable intolerance among many of the people who claim to be the most progressive and liberal of all. I've never experienced hostility like the hostility that I've experienced at the hands of so-called liberal academics. So it's a really important study, and it's a reference point actually that people in the debate can use to say, hang on a minute, this isn't only about populism. This isn't only about Trump, etc. In fact, Luke Conway shows that liberals are more prone to authoritarian thinking than conservatives, and that's the key point in this study. The second thing I wanted to talk about today, like you, maybe I watched the Kemi Badenoch Robert Jenrick debate last night. I'm going to write on this I'm going to write on the contest in the coming week. A lot of my friends are coming out in support of Robert Jenrick. Some other Substackers who I admire, people like Ed West, have come out for Robert Jenrick. I'm going to put my view out next week. In terms of the debate, what's clear is Jenrick is doubling down on immigration and the narrative that he's the guy that can win back Reform voters. Kemi Badenoch is avoiding policy, essentially, running more on values, trust, conviction, conservative principles. As I said last week, though, the primary problem that's facing both of them is that they're operating within a structure that is not going to give them much room for maneuver. A parliamentary party that leans very strongly to the cultural left. And this fundamentally is going to make it very difficult for them to win back lots of these Reform voters. I think there's also a lot that we haven't heard a great deal about. Last night, there was almost nothing in terms of what practical policies will be used to take on the cultural left in public institutions. I thought there was a remarkable lack of discussion around what might follow leaving the European Convention on Human Rights. Kemi Badenoch is still very ambiguous on that, by the way. She's unclear as to where she stands on that issue. I think Jenrick is pressing the right buttons, but there's still an authenticity question mark over his campaign, which is legitimate given the performance of the Conservatives over the last 30 years. My personal view, I think he actually won the debate last night, but it was quite interesting that most Conservative members in the room seemed to favour Badenoch. So, let's watch this space. I'm actually going to write what I think would be quite a strong piece next week around that. I wanted to talk a bit, meanwhile, about, we've got two massive things coming up. We've got the budget coming up in the UK, but we've got the presidential election coming up in the US. And I actually think the presidential election is fascinating for lots of reasons. But one of them is what it tells people in other countries. If you look at the polling, if you look as of this morning, the national average in the polls, Kamala Harris is 1.7 points ahead in the polls. Now, of course, the Democrats have won the popular vote at most recent presidential elections. What really matters are those key swing state polls. And there are about 7 states that are going to decide the presidential election in about 2 weeks' time. Now, if you look at those swing states, in almost every single one, Trump is now ahead. I would argue that Trump's polling numbers today are stronger than his numbers in 2016 and 2020. You don't hear much about that, actually, in the mainstream press at the moment. But I've pulled together the numbers. I'll put this out next week. So if you look at states like Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, Arizona, Nevada, Georgia, North Carolina, and you compare Trump's position today to 2020, obviously when he lost to Joe Biden. I'm just going to give you a few numbers. Write them down if you're at a desk. It's quite interesting. 4 years ago, Pennsylvania, at this point in the cycle, Biden was ahead by nearly 6 points. Today, Trump's ahead by half a point. Wisconsin, Biden was ahead by more than 6 points. Today, Harris is just barely ahead by 0.3 points. Michigan, Biden was ahead by more than 7 points. Today, Trump's ahead by 1 point. Arizona, Biden's ahead by 4 points. 4 years ago, Trump's ahead today by 1 point. Nevada, Biden was ahead by more than 5 points 4 years ago. Today, Trump's ahead. Georgia, Biden was ahead by 2 points. Today, Trump's ahead. North Carolina, Biden was ahead by nearly 3 points. Today, Trump's ahead by 1.5 points. Ohio, Trump was ahead 4 years ago by 0.5 points. Today, Trump's ahead by more than 7 points. I'm not hearing a lot about these swing state polls in much of the conversation, but if you actually compare Trump's numbers today to 2020 and indeed 2016, they're much more favorable. So that leads me to think two things. Either we're heading for a pretty convincing Trump victory, and the Real Clear Politics Electoral College map, based on the current polls, would give Trump 302 Electoral College votes. You need 270 to win. Trump's on 302. So we're either heading for a comprehensive Trump win, or secondly, alternatively, we're heading for a massive error in the polling industry, that we've got another case of pollsters not correcting for bias and statistical problems in their models. Now, I don't know which of those things it is, but if things stay as static as they are, my money is on Trump. I'm pretty confident, actually, if these polling numbers are accurate, he's going to win. The interview that Kamala Harris had this week with Fox News, I thought was remarkable. She really came across quite weak. This was a one-on-one interview between her and Fox News. The fact that she's doing one-on-one interviews just 2 weeks out from polling day shows, I think, how concerned her campaign are at the state of the current polls. And so, look, I'm going to share this table. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll tweet it out after this live so you can get it over at X and compare the numbers. But I'll also put it in a post next week. I think Trump's looking really good. Also, I just want to talk about the ECHR for a minute, because I think this is the next big debate in British politics. I did a piece this week. It was one of the most read pieces of the year, 10 reasons why we need to leave the European Convention on Human Rights. And it was, provocative. It was challenging, because I basically pulled together 10 individual cases that I find utterly depressing, really shocking, and revealing in just how little control and influence we have over our own borders and the security and safety of our own people. And some of those cases you will have known. I've talked a lot about the case of Thomas Roberts in Bournemouth, because I think it is utterly outrageous that the guy who murdered him was even allowed into the country to begin with, not to mention the long line of state failures that followed the arrival of that guy into the country, a 19-year-old masquerading as a 14-year-old. But only this morning, as another great example, I've just put it on X, Iraqi goat herders who found their way into the UK, joined an organised criminal gang of Kurds and Iraqis, ended up in Aberystwyth in Wales, a small community of 15,000 people, started dealing cocaine, used car washes and shops on the high street as front businesses for this drug empire, getting our own people addicted to drugs, breaking our laws, entering the country illegally, setting up fraudulent businesses, and then they just send one of the guys to prison for 3 years. And we've just put somebody in prison for 2.5 years for what they wrote on Facebook. I mean, it's absolutely mind-numbingly crazy and insane, and it shouldn't be happening in modern Britain. But it's another example of how we don't have the legal architecture that we need to prioritize the safety and security of the British people. So the ECHR debate, make no mistake, it is coming down the track. It's going to be the big debate in British politics for the next 5 years. Reform are going to be making the argument over and over again that we need to leave the European Convention on Human Rights. If Robert Jenrick wins the leadership of the Conservative Party will, I assume, have that as their official policy going into the next general election in 2029. We should leave the ECHR. I think increasingly the number of cases that are going to be coming to light, I mean, it's not remotely enjoyable to point this stuff out. It's actually sickening to know that we're going to spend the next 5 years drawing attention to criminals and thugs and murderers and rapists who are in the country, abusing our laws, and we're having to point to it until somebody in the political class actually takes action and does what needs to be done. Now, I've been very clear. 3 things we need to do: exit the ECHR, reform, if not repeal, the Human Rights Act, and have an active deterrent to stop people from making the journey across the channel to begin with. You do those 3 things, you're building a firewall against some of the atrocities and tragedies that we've seen in the country over the last few years. To that, you might add introducing a new piece of legislation, let's call it the British Bill of Rights, let's call it the Great Reform Act, whatever, something that replaces human rights provisions in the UK but makes it clear that the safety and the security of British people will not be subordinated behind the wishes of international courts and judges. It's that clear. Now, I've polled the ECHR question from multiple angles, and consistently, if you make the argument to British people that we should exit the ECHR in order to increase the security and safety of British people, it's not even close. If this goes to a referendum, for example, this isn't going to be a 52-48 referendum. It's going to be like a 70-30 referendum. The argument is a very easy argument to make. If you want to keep your family safe and secure, if you want to keep your children safe and secure, we need to exit the ECHR and redesign our legal architecture. That's why nobody in Westminster wants to have this debate. They've seen the polling, they know the numbers. This is not like remain or leave when it comes to the European Union. So just keep that in mind. ECHR will be the next big debate in British politics. And at the moment, I personally feel as though people on our side of the debate, you might disagree with me, that's fine, but people on my side of the debate, I feel like we're winning this argument. It is only a matter of time until we force through some substantive change. I'm just going to move on to the questions because I promised you 15, 20 minutes. And just to say, if you're watching this Substack live on other platforms, after the event, this goes exclusively to our founding and paid subscribers before anybody else, days before anybody else, then don't forget to hit like and subscribe and to share it with your friends and family. We'll be putting Substack lives in the future on different platforms, but exclusively this goes to our founding and paid subscribers before anybody else. We've had a question from Ian. It's the most popular question on the site. How do we successfully challenge liberal authoritarians? Which I think is something I've been doing over the last couple of weeks in my debates with Mehdi Hassan and others. My honest view is, so I think it's usually at this point where somebody in academia will say, well, we need to bring everybody together, we need to have a discussion and have a reasonable debate about what we want to do in society, etc. I don't actually think that's the way forward at all. As Luke Conway shows, liberal authoritarians are not interested in evidence that challenges their worldview. They are lazy and apathetic when it comes to dealing with things that do not enforce their existing beliefs. They are very keen to punish and silence dissenters and people who are opposed to their own politics. And they are basically masters at gaslighting. The example that Luke Conway gives is what's happening in schools in America. So on the one hand, radical progressives bring forward critical race theory, radical gender ideology in schools. They start to tell little girls that they could become little boys and little boys that they could become little girls. They say that America is institutionally racist. They redesign the curriculum and reading lists around this radical ideology. Then when you point out this is happening, they say, no, this isn't happening. When you provide evidence that it's happening, they still say, oh, well, hang on. This is about conservatives starting a culture war. And what Conway shows is that liberal authoritarians are the masters of refusing to see authoritarianism in themselves while projecting these traits onto other people. It's what he calls authoritarian projection. Now, you see this in the UK all the time. So the culture wars debate. Radical progressives start a culture war in Scotland. We want 16-year-olds to be able to legally change their gender with no medical supervision at all. You point out that this is insane and that most people don't support it. They say, well, how are you starting a culture war? Why are you starting this culture war? This is so irresponsible. This is so inflammatory of you. classic gaslighting, a very specific political ploy. And what Conway argues is that often they don't know they're doing it. It's like a sort of instinctive reflex that they have. He calls it a sort of remarkable capacity for self-ignorance. They don't quite understand how radical and authoritarian they're being, so they accuse other people of doing these things that they're doing themselves. And I think you see that in terms of the imposition of woke ideology in the public institutions. You see it massively in the immigration debate. We're going to introduce an extreme policy of mass uncontrolled immigration. And if you raise questions over it, you're starting a culture war, you're a racist, you're a populist. You see it in the big debate over misinformation. If you raise questions, if you raise criticism, you are misinformed, you are ignorant, you are irresponsible. What they're trying to do is control the information supply. So what I think we need to do as stage one is call them out, is to actually call them out and say, hang on a minute, there's a lot of evidence here to show that you are being as authoritarian as the most unscrupulous, manipulative people on the ultra right wing. We're going to call you out on this. We're going to stand our ground, and we're not going to use the language of radical progressives. So, for example, one of the things I say to conservatives is, why are you buying into this language of culture wars? If you're talking about the defense of families, values, history, heritage, who we are, strong borders, lower migration, why are you using the language of culture wars? I spent much of the last 14 years listening to kind of self-described moderate conservatives saying that they don't want to engage in culture wars. Well, if another side is attacking the very foundations of your civilization, it's not culture war, right? That is a defensive strategy in response to radicals and extremists who are imposing their worldview on everybody else. So I'm just going to be really real and honest with you. There's no nice way through this. This is going to be a very polarizing, difficult, combative debate. It means conservatives, people who care about the country, small c conservatives, whether you're on the, if you're a Labour voter, Conservative voter, whatever, if you believe that we should have strong borders, lower migration, prioritize our history, identity, and culture, and do so in a responsible but assertive way, it means we have to stand our ground at all times and not be scared of nasty words and name calling that liberal authoritarians will throw around. That's stage one. Stage two is we need to organize politically, which I'll come back to. We've had a question, will Donald Trump be helped by the polls, typically underestimating his true support? Really interesting question. This, of course, is what happened in 2016. Pollsters underestimated Trump's support. Have they corrected for that bias? We don't know. Polls have been moving more into cell-based polling rather than landline-based polling. They've been doing more online polling. We're going to have to wait and see. My suspicion is that Trump is going to do better than expected among African American voters. His support is twice as high among African Americans today than it was in 2016. He's going to do very well among Hispanic Latino voters. His support is much higher among those groups than it was 4 years ago and 8 years ago. He's going to do very well among people who haven't passed through the universities, who are working in industry, trades, etc. And he's going to do very well among men and in small towns, medium towns, outside the cities and the college towns. So the realignment that he started in 2016 is actually accelerating. British conservatives could learn a lesson from that because they had the same realignment, but now they completely fumbled it, which is why Reform has a unique opportunity to tap into that realignment and continue that realignment by targeting the Labour's Red Wall, coastal towns, areas outside of London and the universities, and be very organised in terms of how they do that. But I think if the polls are underestimating Trump's support, we're heading for a blowout, and Republicans will be in a very strong position come January when they take office. I don't think there is any plausible way that they are underestimating support for Harris, because the polls by their nature will be picking up lots of highly educated, urban, socially liberal voters. If anything, the risk is running the other way, that they are overestimating support for Harris. And as I say, in those swing states, the numbers are not good for Harris at all. I mean, I'll be really honest with you, I have no idea how this person is running for president. Like, I really don't. And I'm trying to be nice to Kamala Harris. I mean, I don't understand it. She's not very bright. Her arguments are often nonsensical. She went through the Fox News interview this week, not answering questions, literally just using platitudes, not actually answering any of the questions. And I think Trump is back to being his best, to be honest. I think he was he's charismatic, interesting, funny. I have concerns about Trump, like most people. I think in a campaign sense, though, I think he's back to kind of where he was in 2016. If you watch one thing ahead of the presidential election, there's a very interesting podcast. One of my team sent this to me, the Flagrant podcast. Trump's interview on that is really worth a watch, because I don't know what they do or how they do it, but they sort of really bring him out in a more personal way. So he isn't Trump the politician. He's more sort of Trump, you know, the guy at the bar having a beer, talking with people about his personal life and his kids. It's very interesting. I'm not asking you to watch it because it's, you know, massively pro-Trump. I'm just asking you to watch it in terms of seeing a side of him that doesn't always come out at the rallies and the politics and so on. But I think, as I say, we're probably heading into a strong Trump victory unless we've got a massive polling error. A question here. The historian David Starkey has made the point that he believes much of the political logjam has been caused by changes made under Tony Blair. Do I believe that those changes must be dealt with in order for any reform to be successful? Reform to the system, I'm assuming. Without question, what essentially happened after 1997, and David Starkey isn't the only person to point this out, though I know he's done so eloquently. Essentially what happened is the entire foundation of our judicial legislative system was repositioned around the kind of supranational rights agenda. And this happened principally through things like the Human Rights Act, the creation of the Supreme Court, the Equalities Act. And ordinarily, were we in some galaxy where conservatives were representing the people that voted for them, they would have used their majorities in 2015 and then 2019 to overturn the Blairite foundations of our political system. And had they done that, reforming if not repealing the Human Rights Act, reforming if not repealing the Equalities Act, taking on the ECHR. Yes, it was founded a long time ago, but certainly not in a way that is now being applied. We'd be in a much stronger place. I personally believe as a country, we'd be able to control our borders. We would be able to push back against the imposition of diversity, equity, and inclusion in public institutions and government departments. DEI is not a neutral, independent belief system. It is a highly political, activist ideology that is used to promote ideas that are divisive and corrosive to our national community and identity. I firmly believe that, as do people like Francis Fukuyama, as do people like Yasha Monk, as do people like Eric Kaufman, Richard Hananieh, Chris Rufo, among many others. The debate over DEI has moved on. This isn't just a nice human rights agenda. It is an openly political, identity-based program to reshape Western societies around divisive ideas. Much of this goes back to the Blairite foundations in our system. So if you want to fundamentally change the direction of travel, Roger Scruton's also made this argument very eloquently. You know, again, go back and read books like England and Elegy, Against the Grain, among many others. We need to change the foundations of the system. And this, again, is partly why so many people were so frustrated with the post-2019 Conservative government. Had it had the ambition to do some of these things, we would be in a very different place today. But instead, we're in this place whereby we are tinkering around the edges. And actually, just to go back to the leadership debate last night, Robert Jenrick might be pressing some of the right buttons on issues around the ECHR.
Pulling in.
I would like to press him
Front
on this point about the foundations of the system, the Blairite foundations of the system. How far would a Jenrick-led Conservative Party go with regards to things like the Equalities Act, the Human Rights Act,
Shout.
the reassertion of common law, the reassertion of our historic
Frontal.
judicial framework? That's what I would like to press him on, because, you know, if you're not reforming the whole system, like, what's the point, basically? You're never really going to deal with more than the symptoms. I think we've got some time for other questions here. Do you think that we can... sorry, I've watched a podcast which said reform would up their game if Jenrick was elected Tory leader. Of the two candidates, I think Jenrick is more problematic for reform. Obviously, I think Kemi Badenoch would be easier for reform to navigate. It's my personal view. I say that because I think Badenoch is light on policy. I don't think she'd have the appeal among cultural conservatives. And I don't think she has the charisma to cut through in a way that would be problematic for reform. Jenrick, I think, would be more problematic for the party. Not an insurmountable problem, but would be more problematic. We've had another question here that liberal authoritarians have captured the language of the country. How can this be countered? Well, I've sort of answered that in the sense of saying I think we just need to call it out when it's happening and refuse to play that game. If you get a chance to listen to the Political Thinking podcast with Nick Robinson, you'll notice about halfway through the kind of the language games become very apparent. And I openly refuse to play them. I mean, this kind of guilt by association tactic that people tend to use, where you're saying something similar to what Geert Wilders is saying in the Netherlands, therefore you must be a bad person. If you actually refuse to play those games and call them out publicly, I mean, people are not idiots. People who are listening to these shows can see the bias and they can see the partisan leanings of the people who are asking you those questions. If you watch the Al Jazeera interview, again, it's very similar. And of course, this is, again, partly a reflection of the psychology that Conway talks about. So ask yourself a question. Take a show like Newsagents. I don't watch it myself. I've seen some clips on X, but the sort of Emily Maitlis, John Sopel, Lewis Goodall show, I don't think I've seen anybody on that show that has ever seriously challenged their worldview on global events. I can't think of anybody that I've ever seen in a clip that has genuinely challenged their worldview. I can't think of anybody on Question Time, with the exception of Reform MPs, who are invited on and who represent what we might call an alternative to the dominant liberal consensus in the institutions and politics of this country. Okay, maybe Peter Hitchens, maybe Melanie Phillips, that's about it. I can't think beyond that of anybody outside of Reform and those people who genuinely pose a challenge to this consensus among the elite class. And I think that's ultimately what this game is about. It's about the control of information. Why is Substack so important? Because it doesn't allow those people to control the information. If we can get a piece out, like the liberal authoritarian piece this morning, and we can hit 58,000 people or close to 58,000 people at the press of a button, and then we can hit another few 100,000 people on social media, and maybe over the next month, that piece, we can hit 1 million, 2 million people through social media, through people sharing it, and so on. Like, you don't need the legacy institutions anymore. And so the control of information for that group has gone, which is why I think they find the uncertainty and the volatile nature of our public debates now so troubling. I mean, they essentially have had a sort of collective breakdown since 2016 because they can't control the supply of information. So you've seen a sharp crackdown on free speech, free expression, the rise of things like misinformation, disinformation, BBC Verify, this kind of narrative they have that, well, all of these things that seem to challenge our view there must be something wrong with them. They must be based on dodgy statistics or things that we're not, we can't control. And I've noticed this since Substack. There's a tendency to belittle or downplay alternative media. The reality is,
Watch your step.
the alternative media we are building is more powerful and will be more powerful, is becoming more powerful than much of the legacy media. That is the reality. They are only now beginning to realize the power that is coming with this alternative media ecosystem. I've had a question. Do I think that no matter who wins the Conservative Party leadership, the wets in the party, along with the civil service, will block any attempts to leave things like the European Convention on Human Rights and undo the Blairite foundation of the system? Of course, absolutely. There will be entrenched resistance and opposition to anything that challenges the status quo. There was a remarkable report this week that showed the productivity rates in the Home Office just before the general election. Basically, nobody was doing their work. No cases were being reviewed. No cases were being dealt with in terms of illegal migrants and asylum seekers. So the system basically ground to a halt, as you saw post-2016 in the US. When the state does not want to enact a particular policy, as we saw in the Home Office, when civil servants threatened to strike because they did not want to work on the Rwanda policy, those people need to be removed from the state institutions. End of story. They are there to enact the will of people. It is from the people that we derive popular sovereignty, legitimacy, and authority. So again, this goes back to reform, and it goes back to the next political revolt that needs to happen, which is it's not enough setting out your challenge to the consensus. You also now have to set out a comprehensive plan for how you're going to implement that in the face of a state and government departments that are inherently opposed to enacting those radical changes within the system. So there will be an almighty tussle if, for argument's sake, you ended up with a government that was committed to reducing legal migration to the tens of thousands. Imagine a tussle in the Home Office when it comes to changing the visa regimes or leaving the ECHR. Imagine the chaos in the Ministry of Justice and other government departments when it comes to implementing that, which is why, fundamentally, this counter-revolution that we are beginning to see unfold in Western democracies will have to come alongside a comprehensive plan for organizing the institutions of the state to deliver on that. And that means doing things like abolishing the Home Office, replacing it with a new government department, and ensuring that these organisms of the state are organized in a way that they can deliver on policies that have been elected, that have been selected by the British people. It's going to be very, very difficult. Of course, there's going to be entrenched opposition and resistance to all of it. We saw that during Brexit. Brexit was proof of concept. The state did everything it could, essentially, to dilute and block Brexit in one form or other. First, we had the ridiculous debate over hard Brexit versus soft Brexit. And then essentially we had a prolonged attempt by the elite class to overturn Brexit or dilute it to such an extent that it really wasn't distinguishable from the status quo. It was only the reassertion of popular sovereignty through the 2019 general election that resolved the Brexit crisis. It was a reassertion of the people against a system that was anchored in an entrenched opposition to delivering what the people wanted. And in the same way, if you want to change the system along the lines of some of the things I talk about and write about, you are going to need to mobilize popular sovereignty against that system. That is the only way you are going to be able to get things through. So, that's ultimately the way that things will need to be done in the future. Given that liberal authoritarians aren't liberal in any worthwhile sense, don't we need a new word to describe them, such as elitist?
Rental.
Yes, I think that's fair enough. I don't want to spend too much time on terminology. Luke Conway calls them liberal bullies. Eric Kaufman has called them progressive, illiberal
Rental.
progressives. Call them the woke. John McWhorter calls them the elect. in his book on woke racism. There are lots of different words. The reason I've called them liberal authoritarians is, on the one hand, it generates
Frontal.
interest. Well, how can you have a liberal authoritarian?
Frontal.
But also, they themselves use the words liberal and progressive to describe themselves. They are self-described liberals and progressives, but they're not actually liberal in any serious sense at all. I've been influenced by some of the work. Yasha Monk's book, The Identity Trap, is very good. Yasha's on the left. He advised Barack Obama and Tony Blair. Francis Fukuyama's book, Liberalism and Its Discontents, is very good.
Watch your step.
Fukuyama makes
Frontal.
a very convincing case for why these people are not liberal at all. They reject individual rights in favor of group rights. They define people simply by their racial, sexual, and gender characteristics, which is very simplistic. They reject scientific knowledge
Frontal.
and empiricism when it conflicts with their religious-like beliefs. They repudiate their shared history, culture, and identity, so they have no interest in the things that hold nation states and national communities together. And they're deeply politically
Frontal.
intolerant of other people in society. So for all those reasons, as Fukuyama argues, they're not really liberal at all, they're illiberal. Pardon me, I've just got a slight cough. Do I think that I could be shut down at some point? Do I think I could be shut down? I like to think I'm not saying
Frontal.
things that are very controversial, although maybe I am. I think most of the things that I'm saying are supported by a large majority of people in this country. By that, I mean upwards of 2/3 of people.
Frontal.
I can assure you, if there was an attempt to try and shut me down, it wouldn't be quiet. I would be as public as possible and would not go anywhere. I would merely, move to some other vehicle. I invested heavily in
Frontal.
Substack because they specifically made a pitch to protecting free speech and free expression. I have the support of people like you, which means a great deal to me. It allows me to say what I want to say in the national conversation. I can't tell you how many people on a daily basis now will say hello in the street or on trains and say something along the lines of keep saying what you're saying, keep doing the good work. That's, for me, that's like rocket fuel. Like, just if I know I've got people behind me supporting me, like, I'm 100% all in. I keep going. We keep going and going and going. We give voice to people who are not able to be in the system making these arguments because they're busy with their daily lives, but they want someone out there representing them. And in that sense, I'm sure there'll be attempts to, there has been an attempt of sorts among my old colleagues to try and sort of, stigmatize me.
Frontal.
But those people don't really matter. They tend to be working in universities. They're not really in the public debate. They don't have a mass following. So they can be largely ignored. But no, I keep going until we get change. If the problem is liberal institutional extremism, surely the practical solution
Frontal.
is more democracy. Calling out liberal extremists as undemocratic or anti-democratic, I completely agree. Matt, does voting ever really change anything? I do vote. I voted for Brexit. We voted to leave, but as far as I'm concerned, we never truly left. I voted for Boris Johnson.
Frontal.
It didn't change anything. I will continue to vote, but I'm starting to get very disillusioned. I think that comment speaks for a lot of people in this country. Remember, the reason that Brexit crossed the line was because so many non-voters voted. Now, my personal view is, if you are utterly frustrated with the political system, you have two options.
Interrupt.
You can withdraw from the system and participate in what some people would call a retreat from the battle, the fight, the struggle. You can move abroad, you can hunker down and say, this is it, nothing's going to change. Or you can reflect on just how much has happened over the last 10 years, which is not really a long period of time at all in the history of a nation. You know, the rise of UKIP, the vote for Brexit, the Brexit Party winning the European elections, the 2019 general election majority, the political realignment, the re-emergence of Nigel Farage and Reform, 4 million votes, 5 MPs, etc. I think if, you know, the lesson from that is that politics is very volatile. It's entirely possible for new challengers and outsiders to break through. And it's entirely possible to bring about substantive political change so long as people learn those lessons, stand firm and keep going. I really do personally believe that. That is the lesson of the last 10 years. What is needed now, in my view, is a comprehensive, coherent plan that goes from today through to 2029. I think 29 is going to be the big one. It's going to be the election that is going to be really about this civilizational moment that we're in. And it means going from today through a series of stages, elections, contests, political debates, public debates, building a following, building a movement, going into 29, changing the zeitgeist in this country. And I think there's going to be a lot of wholesale radical change around the corner. I really believe that, because what we're going to see over the next 5 years is a managed decline, the managed decline of a nation.
Fear.
That's what we're living through at the moment. We're living through the giving away of our national territory to our enemies like China, the giving away of our freedoms, liberty, individual rights, the creeping crackdown on free speech and free expression, the giving away of the security and safety of the British people to international courts and supranational organizations, the imposition of a top-down, un-British, divisive, anti-Western dogma among the elite class onto everybody else. And that is going to, I think, create an almighty backlash to that elite class from people who have had enough,
Fear.
who believe that there's a lot more to this country than just managed decline, and who believe that there is something, as I've said before, there is something very special about coming from these islands. And the history of these islands is ultimately a history of people, not elites, not politicians, but ordinary people pushing back against the system when it loses touch with what these islands are all about. And I have immense faith in the capacity, the ability, and the willingness and the courage of British people to do exactly that. And I think partly that's what 2016 was all about, partly it was what 2019 was all about, even though people were misled. You know, it's to go back further in time, it's what we saw during the 20th century. You know, consistently, the masses have actually guided this nation and the people who rule this nation in a way that they weren't always expecting or aware of. And I think that will happen again. So I'm personally not invested in the rather gloomy narrative of the Great Retreat. I think, and also just while I'm having this conversation with myself, to see 20-year-olds buying into this narrative. I keep meeting Zoomer conservatives who are saying, well, there's nothing for me here in the UK and I'm going to move abroad. I find that profoundly depressing. It's exactly the time in your life when you should be digging in and campaigning and working to bring about change. Don't be so pessimistic. The panel and audience in the head-to-head program seemed very unbalanced and biased towards Mehdi Hassan's worldview. Is it possible to demand balance before doing a program like this? Well, I'll tell you a story. I insisted that they reserve seats for our Substack audience and community, and they gave me 25 seats in a room of about 200 people. And so, you know, we took the 25 seats and we had 25 members of our community come along, and we met them afterwards in a pub. We all met, had a drink and chatted about the event. And they did make the point that this was relayed to me by members of our community, that they were kind of, I don't want to say segregated, but it was very obvious that they were put in a separate section of the audience, as it were. But thanks to those people who came along, because a couple of them did ask questions that, when you get to the Q&A section, if it's online, did actually bring some balance, or at least created an opening for me to say something longer than 10 seconds before Mehdi Hassan cut me off. So that was really appreciated for those people who came along. And the balance isn't there. I mean, whether you listen to the Nick Robinson interview, the Mehdi Hassan, whether you watch Question Time, BBC, etc., we can all see the bias that exists within the established conversation, the national conversation. So you have to push forward people as much as possible. When that happened, there's another debate, that happened over the last week, which was my debate with Ash Sarkar for the Monk debate, which again, you can listen to online. And they asked Monk debate members, and I think it's fair to say Monk debate members, if you don't know, the Monk debates are based in Canada. I mean, they're ultra liberal, elite kind of people, based in Toronto, in a very liberal kind of, some would say woke nation. And I debated Ash Sarkar on immigration, and the Monk debate audience, when they were asked who won the debate, 90% said me, 10% said Ash Sarkar. So I think if you can get into those forums, you can make a difference, and you can, get across some views. But obviously, being in those debates is really not in itself enough. This has to be about political change, and it has to be about political action. And the reason I've been doing these debates is just to try and sharpen up and get ready for, this kind of 5-year journey that I'm talking about. And it's about getting alternative viewpoints into those debates wherever possible. So getting on Question Time is the next big thing. We need to get on Question Time. Just 2 minutes. Where do you think the 17 million Brexit voters were on July the 4th? I think this follows on from my previous question about does voting change anything? Brexit voters, a lot of them have gone back into apathy. I'm hoping at some point they come back into the political system. Basically, Nigel Farage and Reform took 1/4 of the Conservative Party's electorate. They were mainly Leavers. But we've lost about 2 million Leavers who have left the political system, just given up. And I think mainly because of immigration. What needs to happen ahead of 29 is going to be a big invitation for the British people to rejoin a political movement and get back involved in politics. That has to happen. Their votes are going to be absolutely essential in 29 to bringing about some kind of change. But if you look at what happened to the Brexit vote, basically it went en masse to the Brexit Party, and it then switched back en masse to Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson won 75% of all Brexit voters in 2019, which is, a phenomenal achievement, helped by Nigel Farage agreeing to stand down candidates, and of course Boris later reneging on the terms of that deal by presiding over mass uncontrolled immigration. But it goes to show that Leavers can be pragmatic. Now, where they go next, I think, is going to be fascinating. My working assumption is Reform will finish ahead of the Conservatives, possibly at local elections, if not at the Welsh elections. And what we really need are a couple of by-elections in industrial, Redwall-type areas, coastal towns, to get a sense as to where these people are going. So if you look at the national polls this week, we've had one poll, which is Labour 26, Conservative 26, Reform 21. So what you're seeing is the fragmentation of this two-party system, which is becoming a multi-party system. We're becoming a sort of European-style PR system, but within the constraints of a first-past-the-post two-party system. So that brings an enormous opportunity. Now, in the 80s, the SDP, the Social Democrats, came very close to breaking the two-party system. They came within, I think, 2 percentage points of replacing Labour. And that goes to show you need to reach this tipping point. And once you reach the tipping point, you go from 5 MPs, like Reform did on July the 4th, to suddenly having 100, 200 MPs. But that means you've got to eclipse your rival party in the popular share of the vote. and you've got to do so consistently and appear to be more credible. And it's this battle now between the Conservatives and Reform that's going to define the next, 3 to 5 years. And I think it's going to be a battle that will in many ways define the future of the country. And I write a lot about it. I don't need to say more than that. I think that's pretty evident. So we've reached the end of the hour. What I'd like to do is, we've done as many questions as we can. I'll read through all of the questions and comments after this call, because Archie just presents me with everything that you guys have said, and we're able to go through everything. If you're listening or watching this Substack live after the event, then please consider sharing it with your friends and family, joining us at mattgoodwin.org, Substack of nearly 58,000 like-minded people. If you're watching this on social media, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and follow. That would be appreciated. We covered a lot of ground. Got a lot of ground to cover next week. We're heading into the massive US elections and, of course, the budget, which I didn't mention at all today, but that's going to be, I think, a very gloomy moment in British politics. And check out those interviews. Let me know what you think about the interview with Nick Robinson. Drop me a note, drop me an email. I'd love to hear from you. We will always reply to emails that come in. Thanks for your time. Thanks for your support. As always, it makes it possible to have Archie here with me and to have our team cascading the information across social media, giving other people the arguments and the evidence and the stats they need to be making change in their own worlds and to inform this ongoing counter-revolution that is unfolding around us. Thank you for your time. See you soon. Thanks, everybody.
This is the first in a series of videos about a chemical reaction discovered over 125 years ago. It releases a tremendous amount of heat.
Oh no, the GoPro!
Liquefying metal.
It is so hot.
It is not an explosive, but it can cause explosions.
That is crazy!
But the reactants are so inert, they can withstand a blowtorch indefinitely.
You think this whole thing's gonna blow up in my face?
In fact, when Hollywood directors wanted something that looked like a nuclear bomb, this is the reaction they chose. But in its most common use, one basically unchanged in over a century, it has helped move billions of people all over the world. In the late 1800s, Carl and his younger brother Hans Goldschmidt were preparing to join the family business. Their father owned a chemical factory making dyes for fabrics. So they studied chemistry under Robert Bunsen of Bunsen burner fame. After their father's early death, Carl took over management of the company, later joined by his younger brother.
Defensive.
One of Hans's first major research aims was to find a way to produce pure metals. These were essential for making dyes for everything from clothing and tablecloths to wallpaper. At that time, good dyes were hard to come by. Most were faint and faded further after use. Some required the collection of large quantities of exotic insects. These days, we take color for granted. But in this drab world, people would pay handsomely for bright, color-fast dyes. One such dye was Scheele's Green, which was chemically copper arsenite. As its name suggests, it was toxic, though exactly how toxic is a matter of debate. Still, it became the dominant green dye by the end of the 19th century because its color was unbeatable. The red color of the British Army officers' coats was made from cochineal, a Central American insect, mixed with tin. The addition of tin made the color darker and more intense, so the demand for pure metals was strong.
They had their experience in purifying metals by dissolving them in solutions or in acids and all kinds of things.
The incoming cyanide solution goes on dissolving the particles of gold left in the sand after amalgamation and liquefies it.
And then work with these salts, purify the salts, and then reduce these salts into their metal state. And every step that you would take would then again cause problems, right? Reducing it in a furnace, you have to deal with all the exhaust and the contamination through the carbon.
And metals are very difficult to separate from each other.
They form a mixed crystal, right? So
like an alloy.
Like an alloy, right. They all become, in a sense, one substance that has one melting point, which is why you have to kind of take some steps to separate them.
So Hans came up with a novel idea. He would react a metal oxide, like chromium oxide, with aluminum metal. And his hope was that the oxygen would swap partners, forming aluminum oxide and pure chromium. This type of reaction is now known as an aluminothermic, or thermite, reaction. So I have come to visit Elektrothermit in Germany, a company that is a direct descendant of Goldschmidt's.
I feel like they've set this up like a tour of Willy Wonka's chocolate factory, but instead it's a thermite factory.
Here we are going to try to replicate Hans' first successful reaction. All experiments in this video were performed under the supervision of professionals.
All right, so you've heard of flipping phones, you've heard of folding phones, but technology never slows down. So welcome to a phone with both. The world's first tri-fold phone. This is the Huawei Mate XT is what it's called. So I'd heard about this thing. I'd seen some videos online, but it's also a Huawei phone, so it's China only. So knowing that I'm never gonna daily drive it, I didn't want to like get too caught up, but it's so interesting. Like I just had so many questions, like what is it like to use? What are the creases like? Like what are the trade-offs? How hard is it to carry a triple folding phone? What are the cases like? Why is it called a trifold when it only technically folds twice? I need answers. So I was like, all right, I need to get my hands on one. I reached out to D-Brand and asked, like, can you guys get me a contact where I can buy one? And I never asked questions, but they're always able to pull it off, and they did. So I spent the money, I imported the thing, and now I can give you a tour of the trifold experience. So let us start with just when it's closed, right? When it's closed, you have a pretty reasonable 6.4-inch sized phone. Well, I mean, you know, reasonable from the front anyway. If you're just looking at it, using it, the screen gets plenty bright. It is 90 hertz. And then somehow the bezels are pretty thin and even all the way around. The top and the bottom, the left and the right. And actually, of course, the right side is the screen curving around the edge. So the software appropriately creates a fourth bezel to match. And it looks honestly more like a normal phone than a lot of the other foldables out there. So then using it, you know, you pretty quickly feel that it is thicker than a normal phone. But what's crazy is each of these slices individually is ridiculously thin, about 4 millimeters. So in total, they add up to 13 millimeters thick when it's closed, which would be pretty thick if it was a slab phone, but that's actually about the same as a lot of the other single folds, like the Z Fold 6. So then the power button / fingerprint reader combo button and the volume buttons on the right side here, they're pushed a little bit back of the center. Not the end of the world, totally usable. You're obviously going to notice that parts of the screen are a bit exposed and vulnerable if you're going to put it in a pocket or in a backpack or something. But overall, just as a regular sized single screen smartphone experience, this is actually really respectable. This is like an 8 out of 10, really close to the best I've seen, which is awesome. But then you open it for the first time, and from here you get to the small tablet mode. So yes, size-wise, now we're basically matching a lot of the other folding phones out there, like Pixel Fold, Samsung Z Fold, etc. This is a 7.9-inch diagonal that is roughly a square aspect ratio. I'll be honest, it looks fine, but I actually don't really think it was meant to operate in this form factor most of the time. I mean, why stop halfway when you're just one more fold away from greatness? But it is clearly perfectly usable like this. The crease, your first crease, is impressively small and very easy to ignore when you're actually using it. But yeah, thin bezels all the way around. Again, blacked out pixels on the far left-hand side this time. And there's also still a couple little folding phone tricks. Like, of course, since the main camera is on the back and there's no selfie camera on these two panes, then this is the perfect time to take a selfie with the main camera, but get a full-size preview on the 6.4-inch screen that's still wrapped around the other side. And they are really good flagship quality triple cameras, by the way. I'll get to that in a second. You, of course, get all the other benefits of the display spec, the brightness, the 90 hertz. It's really solid. It's just a little awkward that it's twice as thick in one hand as the other, which is a little unbalanced, and then it is glass on one side and then the like sort of leather material on the other. So it's a little bit weird in that way, but honestly still very impressive. I feel like this is like a 7 out of 10. Still pretty close. But you know, we're not done. So this is what we're all here for. The final fold, which opens this thing up to a full 10.2-inch corner-to-corner display. So this is now a full 3184 by 2232, 90 hertz OLED display, thin bezels all the way around, amazingly, with a hole punch selfie camera over to the left side, 2 creases, 2 hinges, and yeah, this is not an iPad mini size screen in your pocket. This is literally a full-sized 10-inch tablet in your pocket, which is actually incredible. Now, the more you play with it, the more you start to notice little quirks. Like, first of all, it's ridiculously thin now that it's all open. It's actually kind of disorienting to hold a tablet with a screen this big, but bezels this small, and like the whole thing is this thin. It's just kind of a marvel. And then you look at the creases, plural, because now you got 2. And you can actually see there is a small difference between the inward folding crease on the right side and the outward folding crease on the left. But they are also actually both impressively small. But like, yeah, I'm actually kind of sad that I can't like fully daily drive something like this because it is Huawei. Like, you can kind of hack your way into getting some Google services on here, but a lot of this UI, a lot of this OS is still Chinese only. Like, it's not going to be great. It's probably missing some bands in the US too. But just, wow. There's a good amount of software tweaks for the triple fold thing too. Like, when you fully unfold it, the whole UI stretches out, but is still one page on each side. So they've kind of just played this animation to stretch out 2 pages among 3 panels. But the animation's pretty smooth. And there is a wrong way to fold it too, by the way, and it tells you about it. So obviously you can close it pretty easily. The correct way to unfold it is to get the 2 on the inside, but if you unfold it the wrong way, like that, it actually tells you. It says, fold it a different way to use the device, please. You're kind of doing something weird here, which, totally fair. I'll get it right next time. You kind of have to, there is a little learning curve to accordioning quickly every time, but yeah, this has to be a 10 out of 10. I mean, there's the fact that I'm able to fit look at the size of this, a 10-inch display reasonably in my pocket. That by itself is something that no other device can do. So I gotta love that. Another question I had early when playing with this is, I mean, people put cases on every phone. What are cases for this phone like? Turns out it does come with a case in the box, which is this thing. And so really, it's just one back piece of the phone that it can protect when it's fully closed. So this case snaps onto the back of the phone like this, and then protects also a little bit of the exposed screen on the side. So it makes sense. You don't want to get any debris in there. And then it has a kickstand on the back, which can rotate around and support it at a couple of various different angles. So you can watch videos like this if you're into that. And it can also rotate out of the way to expose the wireless charging coils, because it turns out this phone also has wireless charging. And if you just flip it sideways on certain charges, you can get it to line up and work with wireless charging. So that's one type of person who will use the kickstand built into the case. But there is another type of person, by the way, a total reckless psycho that would unfold it like this and then use the phone itself as a built-in kickstand. And it totally works. Like, the UI responds to it, and you can watch, you know, YouTube on a larger part of the screen, but you're also totally scratching the outside part of the screen you're using as a kickstand. So yeah, I'm obviously not going to recommend that. In case you're also wondering about specs on something like this, it's fit flagship specs inside, despite being these crazy thin slivers of a phone. It's the flagship 7nm Kirin 9010 chip made by Huawei. It is also up to 16 gigs of RAM and a terabyte of storage, which is crazy, and triple cameras on the back, as you can see. That's a 50 megapixel main camera, a 12 megapixel ultra wide, and a telephoto. And there's a 5600 milliamp hour battery chopped up and distributed in here with 67 watt fast charging and 50 watt wireless charging, which is kind of insane. And then the whole thing will retail, it's in China, so if you sort of do the conversion price, this like top end model with the terabyte of storage is like $3,500, so $3,000 to $3,500 US dollars. That's actually not that much more expensive than some of the highest end folds that we have. So why is this the only tri-fold phone? Maybe that's the main question you're wondering after all of this. Because it's so cool. It's just the fact that I can actually fit all of this in the dimensions of something that fits in my pocket is nuts. And they've done a lot of things with like nice software touches that actually make it feel really well considered. But yeah, there are also some trade-offs, of course. I think the biggest weakness on paper is going to be the battery, the 5600 milliamp hour battery. You know, fast charging is great, obviously, so that can offset it. But the more time you use this wide open with the 10 inches of screen, the tougher that's going to be on the battery. You know, if you look at typical larger tablets, even the thin ones, the 10-inch tablets are having like 8,000 plus milliamp hour batteries pretty often. So that's probably the biggest weakness here. The speakers are also truly terrible. It's interesting because they come out of the right-hand corner and the left-hand corner when it's open. But it's so thin, it's physics, there's not enough room for big chambers for huge speakers, so the speakers are pretty tinny, pretty bad. And then there is no IP rating for dust or water resistance. Some of the newer foldables have water resistance now. This one, not so much. And then of course the price is obviously going to keep some people away, but honestly that's a pretty small